Hi, and welcome to the Human Side of Business podcast. I'm Ange, MacCabe, CEO and co-founder of Intuitive Performance. I'm a performance coach, HR professional, whole person leadership facilitator, and your host. The Human Side of Business podcast is fueled by the genuine curiosity to understand how personal characteristics and skills can be leveraged to drive individual and team performance, tangible outcomes, and ultimately organizational success within business. Each podcast is devoted to sharing knowledge, expanding our learning edges, and exploring the trends in corporate culture towards growing the emotional intelligence of organizations. I'm so glad you're here. Hi, and a warm welcome to the Elevate Business podcast. Both myself, Ange MacCabe, and Scott Russ are your hosts. We have the pleasure of introducing you to Tim Kachuriak, who is the founder of NextAfter, a cutting-edge fundraising research lab that is home to the world's largest online fundraising experiment library. Tim has spent the last decade researching the question, why do people give? In an attempt to help nonprofit organizations and to increase generosity in the world. Hey, Tim, we're so excited to have you here at the Elevate Business podcast. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Fantastic. Likewise. So tell us a little bit about your company, introduce us to your role, and a little bit about your leadership journey. We're excited to hear more.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. So my journey, I guess, as a leader started probably right after I graduated college. So I desperately wanted to work in the field of advertising and marketing, but it was right after 9/11 and nobody was hiring. And even though I had connections there, so like I worked at a country club all during high school and college. So I like to joke, I had 432 aunts and uncles that were captains of industry. And so I called, Uncle Joe, who ran like the largest ad agency in Pittsburgh where I grew up. And I did my little dog and pony show for him. He's like, look, I'd love to hire you, kid, but we just laid off 30 people yesterday. 9/11 hit our industry hard, our agency harder, can't help you. And so that was my experience coming out of college. And so 6 months of banging on doors and having them slam in my face, I ended up meeting a serial entrepreneur who said, maybe you can do some things for this, these little businesses I operate. And I said, that sounds great. And he said, then why don't you start a business? And I said, well, shoot, I don't know how to do that. And he's like, well, we do. We've got an incubator on the second floor of our office building. I'll give you a desk. I'll be your partner. I'll introduce you to people. And the rest is up to you, kid. So I'm like, well, what do I got to lose? I mean, I'm living in my parents' basement. I've got no overhead. I wasn't married at the time. It's perfect, right?
Right.
So I think I was violently flung into leadership because there was nothing else for me at the time. So I ended up starting this little business and, moved out of the incubator, had a small staff, and I just learned so much about what it takes to really lead a business. I mean, you are the person that ultimately has to sell yourself to people. They have to buy into you as a leader to be able to go deliver on what you say you're going to deliver. So going, getting the customers, keeping them happy, keeping them service, and then getting the people, especially like the early hires, to believe that you can keep them employed. I mean, that's a pretty big challenge for a lot of people that are starting business. So
of course.
Yeah. And so anyway, just to make the longer story short, I did that for about 5 years. I went to work for a nonprofit organization. I was there for a very short amount of time. And that's when I discovered this merger between working with nonprofits doing marketing. And that was kind of like what I dreamed. There was like basically marketing agencies that worked with nonprofits. I went to work for one in Dallas. We were acquired by another agency in Dallas a couple of years later. And during that time, I was like, there's an opportunity to really optimize fundraising. Bringing science, like some of the things that, the folks in the for-profit space have been doing for years, decision science, behavioral economics, conversion rate optimization, bringing that to the nonprofit sector. So that's when I started NextAfter about 10 years ago.
Fantastic. What a journey. And, pausing on the whole thing around violently flung into leadership. I really enjoyed that. And I'm hanging on to it for a second here, Tim, because, when we think about organically, many organizations, that often happens. It's like, hey, you're a super cool kid. You're doing fantastic in your job. What do you think about leadership, kid? You want to jump into it? Right. And, I can only envision some of the learnings that would have happened, but don't like to assume. So tell us a little bit when it comes to like your leadership journey piece, like what have you learned as, developing your business from a leadership perspective, but also leading teams?
Well, I actually really first learned about like what it's like to be a leader when it was my senior year in college. So I up until that time, I was kind of like the follower, and we did like lots of group projects and stuff. And I'm like, look, what's the path of least resistance? How can I do like the bare minimum requirements and like get the best grade possible? So like I'd go and find all the smart people, and seek them out, and then just kind of be a hanger on person. And I just remember like we had this one group project coming up, and it was somewhat interesting to me. I was like, you know what? Let me take a shot at being the leader. And I did. And I was like, I'm going to go and like lead the project. And, the leader has to work harder. They have to organize people. They have to kind of build consensus and get people to buy in, especially when it's a group project with multiple people with multiple ideas about how that project should go. They have to ultimately be the front person, you know what I mean? For the project, the key presenter. And so I just kind of like fell in love with that. I was like, wait a second, I can do this. I can do this. And I think that gave me confidence going into starting my own business because I had that experience to kind of lean back on. But to answer your question, I mean, like some of the things that I learned is that, number one, that the leader has to work harder than everybody else. Number two, that people don't exist to serve the leader exists to serve the people. Right. And that means like, I'm the guy that gets there first in the morning and like has to go and like vacuum the floors at night and clean the dishes, like that's like, the true leader is one who serves, not one who is served by others. So those are like lessons that honestly have been really valuable to my work now, because now I have a much larger organization that I'm running and a lot more people that I'm responsible for.
And so I guess talking about that larger organization, I'm sure there's many learnings between, growing a team of a few people up to a team of, I think yours are just around 40 at the moment. What were some interesting things that you came across in terms of leading the team and really supporting them to be able to thrive in their positions?
Yeah, well, first and foremost, I think what we're learning, especially our entire leadership team is learning, is that there's certain skill sets that are really important at the early stages of a company's development. And there's a different skill set of leadership that's necessary, like once the company gets to a certain size and scale. And so one of the questions that we're asking ourselves is like, are we still the right people? And that's a very, very like, vulnerable question to ask. It's like, basically like, do I still deserve to be in the position I am just because I started the company?
Right.
But maybe I'm not the right person to do that work. Right. Of leading it now. So that's that's some of the questions that we're asking ourselves. But like, how are we trying to like, lead our teams? Number one, we're trying to create space for them to be able to make mistakes. Right. And hopefully these aren't mistakes that like, take the business offline and like, we're totally toast. Right. So like, creating like the right boundaries, but giving them space to learn through tough beats, because I'm sure you probably will agree. A lot of your best learnings come from when you actually kind of get burned. Right.
Yep.
So, and because of the culture of our organization, the nature of the work we're doing, we're constantly doing testing and experimentation. And so we try to frame everything as an experiment. And if somebody does make a mistake, like we just had a big snafu that happened the other day that honestly had been persisting for 7 months and nobody realized it. And it was a pretty big deal, and, we called a meeting together. Nobody was in trouble. It wasn't a finger pointing exercise. We're all responsible and we're all kind of like innocent at the same time. And we talked about what can we take away from this bad experience? What is the key learning? What is the insight that can help to, make us better as a company, as a team, like in the future? So those are the kind of things that we're working through right now.
I really appreciate your vulnerability, even for us, Tim. Like, those are some really large questions as to, am I the right fit for the organization that I founded? Right. And I find that really interesting because it's almost a proactive plan for succession planning. Because oftentimes it's a reverse. It's, I want to spend more time at the country club, or, I just have different passions in life and I want to offload my position, rather than looking at your business as a whole entity and asking yourself the question, am I still fit?
Right. Well, I mean, the reality though is like, I'm a major shareholder of the company, right? So like, like I want to go and enable the company to get as big as possible, because ultimately, pragmatically, it benefits me as an owner, right?
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, like, I also want to be in a role where I don't feel like I'm, like this like lost little puppy just wandering, like, what am I supposed to be doing, and constantly battling with my own insecurity. If I can serve in a role where I'm thriving and I'm humming and everything I'm doing is like 100% in alignment with my best and highest skill set. So, that's where that comes from. And hopefully everybody wants that. Like, who doesn't want that? If not, then you've got a really crappy job as a leader. Yeah.
I get you, Tim, but playing devil's advocate, there's a lot of ego that comes into play when it comes to being that CEO or that quote unquote top dog, right?
Yeah.
Like, it takes a humbled person to think about it from the perspective that you're presenting. And Scott and I have interviewed a lot of CEOs, and they're all phenomenal and thinking along the same way, but there's also many out there that don't think this way. So I think it's really important to share that message that you're looking at the greater betterment of the organization, whether it's for resale value, whether it's for vested interest in your shares, et cetera. So I think that's a strong message, is what I'm getting at in short.
Yeah. And truth be told, like, when I started the company, I didn't give myself the title CEO for two reasons. Number one, because I wasn't really sure if that's the job I wanted. Number two, I wasn't really sure if I was the right person to be the CEO. So my title is the Chief Innovation and Optimization Officer, because there's two things I'm extremely passionate about. Is taking existing solutions, things, problems, and making them better, or developing new solutions to some of the challenges that we're facing. So like innovation and optimization, making things better, or inventing new ways to go about solving the problem, or the things that I love. And so that's where I want to stay, is in that sweet spot. Now, that's very useful in the early days, I guess, in the startup days, for a CEO to have that skill set. But as the company scales, there's a lot more, I don't know, there's a lot different skill set that I'm finding needs to be there.
Yeah. Okay. And so shifting gears a little bit, Tim, I know we've talked offline a little bit about the culture at NextAfter. Can you tell us a little bit more about how you cultivated the culture? Did it something that just came naturally? Was there input from teams? What did that look like?
Yeah. So I think, and I may be wrong about this, but I think it's very hard to codify a culture when the business hasn't existed for a while. Because you don't really know who you are. I mean, the culture is really like, it's the personality of the organization, right? It's kind of like the defining characteristics of how you behave as a corporate entity, right? And you can't really just go and like plant a flag and declare that, I don't think, right? I mean, maybe you can if you just like say, like, our values are world-class and integrity and like all these like words that mean nothing today. So, it took us probably 5 or 6 years to even get to the point where we felt like we could actually codify the culture.
Okay.
And it was me and my two business partners, and we brought in a couple consultants to kind of help us think through and shape, kind of like think about the different aspects of that. And we started to kind of rough out, like, what are the things that define who we are, and how we operate and how we behave in the marketplace. And we ended up like codifying like 8 core values. And I know that's probably a lot, but and they're not one word values, because I think that like sometimes having a narrative to explain the value is probably more important than just choosing the right words. Yeah. So we've done that, and now we're trying to really figure out, like, how do we train our newer staff? Like, we hired 15 people last year. Our plan is to hire 10 more this year. So we're in this like growth spurt now. And all the new people, they haven't been here. They don't know, how to do that. So one of the things that we've implemented, it's actually a pretty cool piece of technology. It's called Tiny Pulse. And it's a employee engagement kind of platform, basically. Yeah. So it sends out a question once a week, and you can answer the question. You get a pulse for where people are at. But there's a second component of the Tiny Pulse, which is called Cheers for Peers. And you can send shout outs to like various team members when they do like really cool things or whatever, but you tag them to one of the 8 different values. So it's a way to kind of train, incentivize people to start paying attention and looking for these behaviors. And then we have kind of like, instead of, we, have like a big deal every Friday in our staff meeting and all that kind of stuff. So that's one of the things that we're doing now is trying to figure out how to train, train people in our values.
Ange is getting excited here. You're talking her language.
We want to talk about team development. I'm here. I'm your girl, Tim. What it comes down to is the people and culture side of things, right? So, for me, what comes up is what type of onboarding process is currently in play or envisioned, and how do you realize that? So it's not just about tactics and logistics of, you need a computer set up and you need to understand this client profile. It's also injecting that culture piece, which is what I get excited about, because it's something that, it's something that flows with the organization. You can have fun with it. There's different avenues now with our technologies and apps that you can roll it out and have it consistent, so that, it's not just your new team members coming on. It's also your mentorship or champion team that are bringing new people on in the organization. They can know what's expected too. And then also it's double entendre or double-edged sword, in the sense of, if you have someone constantly helping out and bringing new team members on, or fresh faces, then it's distilling or reiterating those messages over and over again organically. So it's a beautiful thing to have an onboarding program that's adding efficiencies to that training piece. And then also adding value from I guess a culture, people and culture perspective.
Yes. Yeah. And that's one of the things we want to do as our company grows, is we want to attract people that come in because of the values, that they are attracted to that. That's the reason they came here, not because it's a better pay move or whatever like that. We want people that actually believe in what we're trying to accomplish as a company, but also see themselves in each of the 8 different values that we have represented.
I like where you're going with that, because I've seen companies or corporations in past, make sure that they have a high rating score on Glassdoor. It matters, of course, it's visible, but to me, it's not about the accolades or the awards that you present from a people's choice perspective, or top best company, et cetera, et cetera. It's more about, what is your persona in the market from an internal perspective? Because we spend a lot of money on interfacing from a web design perspective, but oftentimes it's that people and culture piece that's kind of hidden. Unless you get into companies like Netflix, for example. They have their full manifesto that's up for digestion online, which is just kind of top of mind because I seen it the other day. But and there's other companies that are starting to kind of jump on that bandwagon. It's really important to have an inflow of people, and having that kind of marketing creative background that you have. I'm sure that you could come up with many ways to do so.
Yeah, I'll share one way that we've done that. We put on an annual conference called the Nonprofit Innovation Optimization Summit, and
cool.
It's cool because it's absolutely the opposite of all the other conferences in our space. I mean, if you've been to a nonprofit fundraising conference, it's like a snore fest. It's like the same old over and over and over again. And, the keynote speaker is really just the sponsor that put up the most sponsor dollars. And so they're basically just giving not even thinly veiled, a sales pitch from the stage. And so I'm like,
that's how you really feel, Tim.
I'm telling you, like, once you have a definition of the problem, the solution becomes very, very apparent. You go the opposite direction. Yeah. So we put on this conference, we spend crazy amounts of money, like bringing in the best speakers we can. We bring in like 16, 18 of like leading digital marketers, most of them from the for-profit space, for 2 days to pour into our nonprofit community. It's open bar for 2 days. We have these killer parties. It's the best time ever that people have ever had at a conference. And they're like, wow, if this is the attention to detail and this is like how fun it is just to come to your conference, I can't imagine what it's like to work with you guys. And that's where we get all of our clients. That's where we get all of our like leads for new employees, is once they kind of experience what we're all about as a company. So and I'll tell you what, probably one of the best benefits of doing that conference is that we put it on with our entire staff. We have no outside help or services that are provided, except for bartenders and things like that. So like everybody has to play a role, and it's a different role than that you're typically playing, right? So like we're all like moving boxes around, putting stands together, and I mean it's such an all hands on deck kind of experience that the bonding, I feel like we bond like 5 years in 2 days. It's amazing. It's amazing.
Scott, I think we need to have an intuitive performance conference. I think that's our next step.
I'm waiting for an invite to Tim so we can learn, and then we can host our own, right? It's always learn from the best.
NIOsummit.com. Go check it out. It's September 21 to 23 or something, Kansas City. So if you can get down to Kansas City,
all right,
we'd love to host you for sure.
All right. Ange, we'll put your name in for the roster of speakers.
There you go.
It won't be in the digital marketing space, but if you want to talk human skills and people and culture, she's definitely your gal.
Yeah, exactly. I was just going to say, I don't know how competitive I would be in that space, but
a different lens.
Yeah, a different lens. For sure.
Well, hey, you can't do any sort of strategy without people, right? So, there you go.
This is just it. Good spin.
Yeah.
When we're talking about the peopling piece of things, what is your vision for your team coming into 2022?
Wow, that's an interesting question. Vision for our team heading into 2022. I think the biggest thing that that's a great question. I don't know if I have an answer. I'm stumped. I'm rarely speechless. The vision for my team heading into 2022. I don't know. That's a great question. What do you mean by that? Help me understand that a little bit more.
Yeah, understood. Yeah, for sure. So on its face, it was very subjective for a reason. So that understanding, where do you want to take your team in 2022? So that would be like the subjective visionary side of things. Mm-hmm. From a more tactical space, it's like, what type of objectives or goals are you looking to help implement with your team members this year?
Well, I'll start with our leadership team. So in the spirit of continuing to be very vulnerable, I recently reread Five Dysfunctions of a Team. Mm. And I realized, oh my gosh, we are so dysfunctional. And I've been saying that for the last couple of years. I said, we are a highly effective, dysfunctional band of misfits. And this book, just totally reinforce that, because a lot of the behaviors that are in the characters in that and the story, I identify with a lot of that stuff. And I think that that's something that we have to bear in mind that we all love each other. We're all very, very close, and we like each other. We respect each other, but we're still dysfunctional. You know what I mean? I think that that's one of the things that sometimes people don't realize. They're like, well, we get along really well. Yeah. But you're not dealing with the stuff. You know what I mean? You're not dealing with the interpersonal relationships that are keeping you guys from being able to go and speak very candidly and beat up ideas to get to the ultimate best solution. And so that's the number one thing for my leadership team is I need us to, number one, become aware of the problem. Number two, to peel back the layers of some of those interpersonal relational things that are keeping us from being a highly effective, very high functioning team.
I get you.
Yeah. And just to give you one example, right? So, we have these different departments now, and now there's these little fiefdoms that are being formed. And what I hear in meetings is well, my team and then my team. I'm like, hold up a second. It's one team. It's this team, right? We are one company. It's the data business is doing this, and the client service business. I was like, there's one business, So, yeah, but that's the kind of stuff that it's sometimes subtle, but it's really the real meat of what needs to happen.
I think it's something that we've seen with our clients as well, and it's natural almost within the growth of an organization. And as you start to grow, there's more silos that are formed, and it takes that much more intentional effort to make sure that everyone's on the same page, everyone's aligned, and the stuff is getting dealt with, so to speak.
I was kind of spinning in a different direction. For me, I automatically go to that human side. Mm-hmm. And you said it, it's a human skills piece of things where it's we've been taught how to business. We've been taught, how to scale. We've been taught how to market, but we've never organically been taught how to people. Mm-hmm. And so, in speaking to some of my executive coaching clients in past, it's we almost have these toddlers running around in our head. And from a social norm perspective, we've been taught how to hold them back or manage them for the most part, but then all of a sudden they just pop out And it's kind of like, okay, what do we do with this? And it can range from, a divide perspective all the way up to dysfunction. So I can appreciate where you're coming from, and you're not alone in the sense of having a growing team, right? It's a real thing. And I would say, Scott, what is it? Like over 95% of our clients, come to us from a tactical program perspective. So it's either training and development, maybe they want to get into coaching with us, or it could be the people and culture consulting side of things of our business. But ultimately, it all comes down to people and helping them solve problems from a human skills perspective.
Yeah.
All
That's
right.
awesome.
Yeah.
Well, this has really been fantastic, Tim. Really appreciate you taking the time to share your leadership experience all the way from the start of working your senior grad year to where you are today. And we always like to ask our participants this one final question, and it's, what are 3 words of inspiration that you would want the world to hear?
I'll give you 3 letters: ABC. Always be curious. I think that's like the one thing that like probably unites every single person that works at NextAfter is this bond of insatiable curiosity, right? We're constantly trying to figure out what's next after this. We're constantly testing, constantly experimenting, and then we're constantly sharing that with the world. And what that does is it puts positive, like innovative pressure on us to come up with something new tomorrow. And in order to do that, you got to be curious. You got to question things. You got to say, what happens if we tried this? What happens if we tried that? And honestly, I think that's been the key to our success, is that we haven't stopped asking that question of, how do we make it better tomorrow? Like, how do we change and disrupt what we're doing today? I mean, like I just told my senior leadership team, I said, my 10-year plan is to put our consultancy out of business, right? Putting our own agency out of business, right? Because if we are going to go and hit our ambitious target, we can't do it operating the way that our business operates today. It's going to have to be something different and bigger. So how's that? ABC, always be curious. Yeah.
That's fantastic, Tim. Thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your leadership and entrepreneurial insights with ourselves and our subscribers.
Awesome. Thank you.
And for those who would like to learn more about NextAfter, we're going to provide a link to the company's profile to the Elevate Business podcast title page. Take good care. Thanks for listening to the Human Side of Business podcast. I'm glad you could join us. If you enjoyed today's episode and want to stay updated with our latest content, make sure to visit our website. The link can be found in the episode description, where you can subscribe to the podcast, sign up for our newsletter, and learn more about our whole person leadership services. Sounds interesting? Explore the Whole Person Leadership Cohort by Intuitive Performance, a unique program that offers unparalleled support to managers on every step of their leadership journey. Our program features evidence-based assessments, workbooks, group coaching, and interactive learning experiences to help you level up your leadership skills. Reach out today to apply to one of our upcoming cohorts. Until next time, take care and stay curious.